Welcome to Life Beyond the Founder, a podcast produced by Untold. This conversation is going to be a continuation of our last episode where we're going to dive into what does it mean to talk about blind spots when it comes to succession. And this is going to be related to the founder, the organization, even the board. How do we guard against these blind spots that can derail us and our transitions? So, Molly, I want to pose the question to you. We love talking about blind spots. We hope that we are acknowledging and identifying blind spots, but to our surprise, we still keep finding them.
They're everywhere.
They're there. But at Untold, we talk about them in a different language. We borrowed this from another organization. Mm-hmm. The idea is that there are two types of blind spots, and some of them are pretty easy to address, but there's another type that I think often gets overlooked. So we talk about them as our unconscious incompetencies and our unconscious competencies.
Yeah.
Sorry, I want to make sure I get that right. It's a mouthful. Those two things, talk about what they are, how do they work within our organizational context, and how do you think about it?
Yes, I love this conversation. And the language, we borrowed it from kind of our leadership operating system. We have a lot of them. We have so many leadership operating systems, but the one we've been using for many years, it's a combination like personality assessment and toolkit called the 5 Voices. And, you know, they're not the first ones to invent this language, but there's essentially a spectrum. So you know me, everything is a spectrum. So on the spectrum of blind spots, there's, as you articulated, unconscious incompetencies. These are the things that we don't know that we're bad at. So my easy example, I'm like the queen of typos, and so I literally don't see them. I'm just like banging out emails, and I don't slow down enough, and I just visually can't see that I've spelled 10 things wrong. So obviously that's an easy example of something that someone points out to me. Hey, Molly, you have typos all the time. So once that blind spot is illuminated, of course, you develop tools and systems around it. So I have a team member proofread, or I use Grammarly or whatever, right? That's the example of a classic blind spot. So you've got your unconscious competencies. Then you've got your conscious incompetencies. So these are the things that you know that you're bad at, and everybody has them. It's not really a blind spot. It's just an acknowledgement that, hey, I'm not strong in whatever,
It's a weakness.
It's a weakness. And you as a leader or just as a person in the world develop contingencies. You put people around you that help fill in that weakness.
Sure.
I feel like the leadership world and in the practitioner world, we talk about those two things a lot. How are we developing systems and structures to support our weak spots, illuminate our blind spots, and kind of move forward from that? What I think I don't hear about a lot, and can actually, in our experience, I think be even more insidious than the unconscious incompetency, is something called the unconscious competency. So on the other side of the spectrum, you've got, things you don't know you're bad at, things you do know you're bad at. Then you've got stuff you just have to work at like a normal person. Then you've got stuff you know you're good at. And then you've got stuff that you don't know that you're uniquely good at. These are your unconscious competencies. And these are the things that, unless you've worked with someone for a really long time, like we have had the benefit of working with each other, these are the things that even the people around you don't know. They say, the saying, those who can't do, teach. The inverse is also true. When you're so good at something, you actually don't know how to coach someone else in it. If you find yourself, as a leader out there listening, if you find yourself constantly being frustrated with your team about something that you think should be easy, and it's your coaching is do better, or I don't know why you don't get this.
Yeah.
That's a signal that you've got an unconscious competency. The thing that we've discovered in our many years of working together and growing the organization together is that unless this is language that an organization has, and unless this is something that colleagues are looking for in each other, an organization's systems and teams and assumptions and vision literally grow around a founder's unconscious competence to the point where it actually feels impossible to get the founder out because, well, I can't imagine anyone else being able to articulate the vision.
Right.
In our case, fundraise.
Yes. Tell me more about that. Because this will be a humbling episode of reminding me of that you're not that special.
Yeah, you're not.
You're not that special, and that's okay. I can live with that. But
yeah,
we discovered this language of unconscious competency kind of late in our journey.
Yeah,
and then we identified my unconscious competency kind of late. And I wish we could turn back the clock and go back to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think we would have saved ourselves a lot of...
We'd be in a much better place, frankly. That's the hard part of this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me more. You mentioned fundraising.
Yeah.
Talk about how, what was that like as we kind of uncovered that? And then what have we done about it to try to remedy that?
Yeah. So this next part for those listening is going to be really specific to Untold and particularly specific to Justin. But as I'm talking about this, I want you to be thinking about what is this for me? Whether you're a founder or a leader, or if you're a second in command, what is it that your boss is doing that you're oh, this is an unconscious competency. So in your case, fundraising. I mean, it's not unusual. It's not special for an organization to have a huge amount of their donor relationships be originally connected to the founder. That's really typical. What's a little bit atypical, I think, in the way you are special.
Thank you. Tell me more.
Yeah, you're so special. The unique way that Untold approaches fundraising or donor development in particular, I mean, we didn't invent it. It's the same philosophy and the same spirit that Hope International applies. And there's books about it. Henry Nouwen has written a book about the spirituality of fundraising. We didn't invent it, but we really deeply embraced a very relationship heavy, ministry flavored version of fund development. And that in itself is not the unique thing. It's that you, from day one, have been so good at that. The way you approach talking about funding, talking about money, developing donor relationships, investing in those donor relationships over decades. We have so little donor attrition because you are very uniquely gifted in fundraising. We've found over time that it's a nice thing to say, yeah, Justin's really good at fundraising. And that's how we articulated it for, the 13 years I've been around. But we didn't realize until about the last 18 months that it was an unconscious competency that was undermining the success of anybody else trying to fundraise. And the way that we found that out is it was so hard bringing a new team member on, or even me handing donors over to me. I would say okay, how should I approach this? What's your take on this relationship? And I just couldn't get much specific out of you. It would just be you'll feel it. You'll know because you just knew. And it was not something that I just innately know how to do. I needed a more technical approach.
Yeah.
And so in the absence of you being able to teach something that you're so good at, instead of actually creating systems around that, for the longest time, we were just well, I'm taking for granted the fact that no one else on the face of the planet can fundraise the way Justin does. So that's what he has to do. I could never do it.
Yeah.
And it became a narrative on the team that no one could be as good as Justin at this. It's not teachable. And so we might as well not try. So the systems grew around you, you as the essential center component of the fundraising mechanism.
Yeah.
And it's obviously when I talk about that, it's not true. Talking about it that way, it's of course there's other people on the face of the planet that could be as good at fundraising as you.
Yeah.
But the key was we didn't know how to extract that from you. in a way that we could teach and develop other people. So,
and as we talked about, the other people, including our board, kind of bought into that narrative.
Oh, totally.
And that has made it even more challenging for us to walk through this succession, because they're like, we love Molly. She's great. We've seen her do so much over 13 years, but can she fundraise like Justin fundraised?
And I would have been the first to say, probably not.
Yeah.
But when we realized about 18 months ago that, you're uniquely gifted in this, but that doesn't preclude other people from growing in it. I mean, if anyone who's listening actually knows me, it's ridiculous for me to make any athletic analogy here, but I'm just trying. It's like, just because you're naturally good at running doesn't mean no one else can coach and train up. Like, I'm not going to beat Kipchoge in a race, right? But I can train really, really hard, and I can get really, really, really good. And I could win a race if I was given the right coach and the right training. But if someone just looked at the way I run right now, totally raw, without coaching, without training, they would think like, no, this is not a competency you can develop at this point in your life, right? But it was the same for fundraising. Like, we had to get an outside perspective to say, here's how Justin does this. Here's how you could actually grow and develop in these things. So I want to hear from you about that process. Was it painful to hear that your actual greatest talent was holding the organization back? How did you navigate that? And then we'll talk about the practicalities of it.
Yeah. Honestly, as much as it was hard to confront it, I think part of it too was hard to confront the fact that I thought I had been teaching people how to do it.
Yeah, that's a classic sign of it too.
It's not that I thought that I was just like,
do better.
Gosh, like, you can never be as good as me, right. So don't even try. It's like I was trying to teach people how to do it, and I realized like how far short I was falling in doing that. And that's, that is one of the harder lessons to learn, especially at the end of your leadership tenure in this role, because I wish we had had another 10-year head start on this for the sake of the organization and for your leadership that you're stepping into. But it was really interesting to work with a partner. We had this coach, her name's Olivia, and
so great.
The whole Path for Growth team is just amazing. But the way that she asked questions to draw out the things that I thought was just, they were understood, they were assumed, they were a given. She was just digging deeper and deeper into the details of when you walk into a room and you look around a room that you've walked into, what are the thoughts that's going through your mind? Like a level of detail to help to create standards and processes and training modules for fundraising that was at a level that I had never thought about before. And it, as tedious as those conversations were, walking through and talking about every single thing, we were able to take 50 pages of notes from my brain and turn it into a handbook, a manual that's going to guide not only how we select development people in the future, but how do we coach them and help them be successful in that role. And so it is something that gives me great hope to know that this is, and you could take that and you could translate to any part of the organization. And I don't think we have a ton of other blind spots, but
we wouldn't know.
So
we have to ask the team.
But for me personally, as I hand over this leadership transition to you, and I don't even, and I think that there will be generations to come that will figure out how to take what I downloaded and make it better. And I hope that will be an iterative process to get there. But it is comforting to know, as much as it is, it does kind of hurt your ego a little bit. But it is comforting to know that the thing that, as you step out of this role, the thing that you are leaving behind is not going to leave the organization flailing because they don't understand how to do this, but that has been translated into something that can be carried forward. So I do appreciate the process, and am grateful that as much as you want to be wanted and you want to feel needed and all these things we talked about earlier, these are core fears of us. Like, this is what it means to be replaceable, to be dispensable.
Absolutely.
And the fact that we can translate it into a process that other people will carry forward is something that gives me great joy.
Yeah, it's such a new and interesting way to think about, like, in any organization or on any team, if there's someone who feels just like absolutely essential and irreplaceable, there's probably a way for them to teach that to other team members, but you need a third party to extract it. I mean, to your point, the actual process we went through took many months, where you would literally just talk out loud, and we would go from you saying things like, yeah, and then you just like ask the donor to invest in the work. And it was like, no, literally, what's going through your mind? Like, how are you determining, how are you reading people's body language? How are you making this decision in your head? To the point, where we have a, multi-chapter handbook now that everyone gets to put their own flavor on. But there is a way to operationalize someone's wild talent. And that's just such an exciting thing, because it makes it possible for anyone who's willing to train and close gaps and lean in to actually be gifted in any of the areas that we need to be gifted in to lead really well.
Yeah.
Well, I picked on you.
Well, and let's pick on you for a second.
Yeah, I was going to say, my turn. What are my blind spots?
Well, we won't talk about your unconscious incompetencies. There are not many, and I think at this point we've probably revealed them enough to you that they've moved from blind spots into weaknesses. But there's a lot of things that you are really, really good at. It's the curse of just your expertise, your knowledge, the things that come naturally to you. So I don't know which of these things I want to pick on, but I'm excited for you as you step into your leadership role to get to start earlier than I did at identifying what are the things that I just think I'm just very, that I'm naturally good at. I'm not recognizing that it's not translating. One thing we talked about was the idea of cross-cultural leadership and cross-cultural relationships and influence. And that's just something that you have such a high emotional intelligence, and that probably covers a larger, span of what we're talking about here, but like teaching somebody to have the emotional intelligence and to understand the context of how they're communicating to somebody in East Africa or South Africa and how you need to relate to them and communicate to them. And that is something that, it feels like, I don't know how to teach you to do that.
Just do better.
Just do the best,
Try harder.
Read the signs and adapt. But that is something that is critical in our work. And we teach it with how to read signs when you're across from a donor and how do you respond accordingly. But doing that cross-culturally with our programs team and our East African and South African leadership, something that you have done so effortlessly, but it is something that we need to translate into a larger group of our team. So that's one thing I think is a priority.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because one thing that we disagreed on early on, we still probably fundamentally disagree on, but I've come around to your way of thinking about it. I'll never admit that you're right. Is that I remember early on, a decade ago, I would, every year we make our professional development plans along with our work plans. And my strategy for professional development 10 years ago was I was like, I want to take the things I'm weakest in and learn everything. I want to be equally talented across the board. I wanted to get an A+ in every class, basically. And you're like, okay, to a certain extent, that's going to be a waste of your time, because if we have a critical gap, yes, we need to close that. But you're going to have weaknesses that you need other people and systems to fill in. You need to lean into your strengths and actually get better there. So I resisted that line of thinking for many years and was like, no, I will brute force my way into being equally gifted in every area of leadership. But probably 2 years ago, maybe more, I actually took your advice of leaning into strengths and got certified in cultural intelligence, because it was something that, to your point, I think over, a decade of experience working and living in the East African context and just trying to expand my understanding of, how East Africans think about time and language and hyperbole and communication and reading body language and all that stuff, I wanted to put a science behind that. And so in going through this cultural intelligence certification training, it was kind of like the experience that you and I had when we were creating the donor engagement handbook, where I was like, oh, the thing that I am naturally doing is actually called something. This is called being high context.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. And I just thought you should be reading people's body language and seeing who else is in the room to understand what this person is actually trying to tell you. Learning the language and the science behind the things that someone points out as your in unconscious competence actually can make it more teachable. I still have a long way to go. I remember when Chelsea, our American programs director, came on, I was like, just like field relationships. And she was like, well, I have no idea what anyone is talking about. And it took her, she's a very, very fast cultural learner also, but it took me getting certified in CQ to be able to articulate to her the things that I was just telling her to like do better on. And so it's been such a cool journey. And I really want to keep leaning into the idea of that type of blind spot across the whole team. Because again, it becomes insidious because it prevents other people from growing. And then it makes you essential when really you should be replaceable, not you, the royal you.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, okay,
Agreed.
Let's keep talking about blind spots though.
Well, and let's talk about, I'm curious, I'll make you identify maybe there were some blind spots. I'm curious to know, as you thought about, were there any blind spots that this transition has particularly brought to light that you and or I did not see, but it has become clear in this transition season that this was an area that we needed to address?
Yeah, this is still like unfolding. So this is an interesting, usually I like to talk about things after I've actually really thought about that. And this is like, I'm still in the process, literally actively of learning this. But I think I have really, I think just like my personality and the way I'm wired, I really want to resist the idea. And allow me, listener, to fumble my way through this. Maybe some people can relate, but I'm like a man of the people. I really want to be the one who's like helping get the task over the finish line. I never want to get so disconnected, not only from the field work, but like from the work that the team is doing. Like I have this really innate desire to have mastered every craft that I'm asking someone else to do. There's pros to that and there's cons to that, right? Like I get it. I think the thing that I'm realizing in this transition that has the potential to really cut me off at the knees as a leader, and probably already has, I'd have to ask our team, and I will, is to get so involved in the tiny details, my heart behind it being, I'm with you, I want to help you do these small tasks, I want to, like, there's nothing I'm too good for, that's the heart behind it. What I'm sacrificing in that is I actually do have a unique view of the organization that no one else has. And I think acknowledging that as a blind spot where it's like I'm forsaking or I'm giving up the gift of a 360 view to zoom into one pixel. And it's like, as much as it could be helpful to help the one pixel, weird metaphor. It's like, yeah, sure, it's helpful to a person on the team for me to like, be with them and help them get this one task done. It's more helpful for me to like let them fail forward in doing that, ask their direct team members for help, and for me to provide the 360 perspective and context for why that one project matters, or why failure is not an option, or why failure is an option. Like I have this blind spot tendency to want so badly to be a comrade that I'll give up the unique view of the leader. I want to be on the front lines, but I'm on the lookout, and I think I'm still juggling that and figuring out how to illuminate that blind spot, how to put people around me to support that, to like snap me out of it when I get onto the front lines. So that's one that I'm like actively working.
To move between the two.
Yes. Yeah.
Really gracefully, because it doesn't help anybody for you to stay up here.
Right.
Doesn't help anybody for you to stay down here, but to be able to move between the two.
So good.
I think it's so important. And this is the perfect time. I had to tell the story at some point, but there was a time just as a comment on how much you love to just be in the work itself. There was a conversation, and I don't remember what we were talking about, but you were like, what's that word where you ask somebody else to do something for you, and literally you could not recall the word delegate because it is so so
I think I literally said
antithetical.
I remember being like, what's the word where you like make other people do your work for you? So I would like I just so don't want to be the person who's like, I'm not willing to do this. But again, to our point that we talked about in the last episode, my heart behind it is to be like helpful. The ego behind it, though, is I want people to see me as a peer and to think well of me. Mm-hmm. That doesn't help the organization, right? I am just constantly having to re-inspect, okay, my heart is good, but is my motivation actually because I want to be liked? I've forced you and Lindsay to watch The Office. Andrew and I have watched the entire series, an embarrassing number of times. And Michael Scott, the boss in The Office, is like, oh, would I rather be feared or loved? I want people to fear how much they love me.
It's true.
That's my flaw.
I know. And it's, as you talked about earlier, this one of the areas that we are too similar in.
Yeah, we want to be liked.
And that has caused us to avoid certain things and certain conflicts and certain issues that we didn't address before they got to a boiling point.
Yeah, that's a weakness for sure.
So that's been something that we've at least we've acknowledged it. We moved it from blind spot into weakness, yes. But it's still something that we need to grow in. I would love to talk a little bit about, I'd love your take on this because it's obviously very close to home for me, but one of the blind spots that this draws back a little bit of what we talked about in the last episode. One of the interesting blind spots is how the founder's story.
Oh yeah, this is great.
And the brand story of an organization, how they become
one.
They become one.
Yeah.
And how that's even encouraged. I mean, it's honestly encouraged in the beginning.
Yes. The mythology.
This is how you create.
Yes. The mythology of a founder has such a cultural grip in America. You think about every big tech company, every big the garage version of the Microsoft startup, the founder mythology around the bootstrapping, whatever. There's this whole American cultural obsession with a founder's mythology and how that made the organization and the company what it is. And there's a world in which that's fun and cool and helps people rah around the mission. But in our world, we found that over time undermined the ability of the organization for the mission to grow past the individual. Yeah, talk about that.
Gosh, yeah. And even as we were raising money with donors, I mean, I think donors obviously wanted to be a part of the mission, but they also they wanted to be part of this story, this origin story.
They wanted to invest in you.
They wanted to invest in me.
Yeah.
They wanted to be on the ground floor of this thing, and they saw potential in my leadership, and I'm so grateful.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think what I want to clearly articulate here is that that is a necessary stage.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you are investing in a leader, and you need to trust and love and invest in the leader. The hard part is, when do you get to a point where then you have to detangle? I think it's more about stages than it is about an eternal state of being.
Right.
So I had to interact with that.
Yeah. And I wasn't, the first time we had one of our, we were working with this agency, they were coming in and they were talking about helping us really crystallize what the brand identity was of Untold. And then the consultant we were working with, she was like, she's a woman, right?
Yeah. He was like, Untold is female.
Untold is female. She's the brand persona is clearly this nurturing, caring African mother, and not a white guy that likes to go out and mountain climb. And so Untold's brand persona came through even in the midst of it. But there are ways in which my influence and my origin story just really created a little bit of a stranglehold, even with how we taught our development teams to talk about Untold.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever expressed it this way, but what they internalized was, I'm really supposed to help tell Justin's story.
Yeah, Justin and Cornell.
And talk about then the work that we do. And it was a big aha for us when we realized like we need to equip our donor engagement team to understand how to tell their story and connect their story to the work of Untold, not
more
my story.
Importantly, get the donor's story and connect their heart to the mission of Untold. It's like, there's so many things that we could talk about around there. It's inspiring to hear the founder story. That's amazing. It's inspiring to hear a client story. That's obviously what you're investing in at the end of the day. But I think Nancy Duarte, in one of her books about speaking and like being a good storyteller, is like the temptation of a person or an organization or whoever's telling a story is like to present yourself as Luke Skywalker, right? Like, I am the hero, join me in my quest, when really the audience is Luke Skywalker and we are Yoda. We are the guide. We are the wise guide for the person joining the mission to like live into their calling. And the transition between like making you the hero to making Cornell the hero to making the donor engagement person the hero to not even making the donor the hero, but to saying like there's a story here that we all get to play our unique part in. Let's unlock your unique part. Yeah. Instead of saying like invest in Justin, which again, great early stage, but 17 years in, we can't live off of that.
That's right. And it was, so that was a big shift in our learning. And then even as this was still unfolding, we started to toy with the idea of this strategy. And really, obviously there was ego involved in it, but at the end of the day, it felt like, okay, we need some way to amplify the message of Untold. And is it beneficial for us to lean in and leverage the founder stories, create new opportunities to platform myself and Cornell and get in front of people to talk about what it was like for this kid from, suburban Georgia outside of Atlanta to come to Kenya and meet this Kenyan pastor and work across countries and ethnicities and tribes and come together for this, beautiful redemptive story. And we said, if we can use that as the on-ramp into a deeper conversation about Untold, we'll use this, and this will amplify the story, the brand, and all that. And so we made a bet on that. We wrote a book. We created a website for
had a
my
whole
personal brand. Yes.
Yeah.
We did a podcast.
Yes, we did.
Much like this. And it was all in our minds, at least, in service to how do we get in front of new people? How do we share the story of Untold? But what we were doing that was insidious was we were creating a deeper connection between Justin and Cornell and the work of Untold, making it harder and harder for people to distinguish between the two. And that was that ultimately, some in part due to the way the execution of the strategy, part of it also because of COVID, kind of shot that thing in the foot. And we realized like it did not actually, it did not open up a lot of new audiences for us, but it may have done us a disservice when it comes to kind of our brand story.
And it was like, really looking back, it was such a gift that didn't work out, because the way I would articulate it as the insidious part is not that we were telling your story. It's a beautiful story that needs to be told. The book was awesome. Like, we still give it to people and people still love it. Origin stories are important. They're critical. What's bad and like potentially really damaging and soul crushing is when you combine the identity of the founder or the leader and the work. Because not only does that over time undermine the ability of the work or the mission to move past the individual, at its worst, it actually sucks the soul out of the person. Like, if you become Untold, and then inevitably, as Peter Greer says, 100% of leaders transition, what happens to the leader whose identity has been so intertwined with their work that when their work is no longer their work, what is who are they? Like, that's the bad part about it that I want people to hear. It's not that telling a founder's story or telling an individual story is bad inherently. And there's a season where it's necessary and where it does drive the work. The soul of a founder is the soul of an organization in the early stage. But can the organization and the founder know and discern through like lots of wisdom and support and advice, when is the time to separate identities, and how do you do that versus doubling down and saying like, this identity runs the brand and you can never leave? Because if it had worked, if the Justin T. Miller brand had worked like we wanted it to, this succession would have killed the organization.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's so different for every organization. There's so many different ways to discern when to start separating the founder story from the brand story. But for us, to your point, the failure of your personal brand, I hate to call it a failure.
Yeah, it's okay. It is a failure.
The death of your personal brand was a gift. And that actually led to the rebrand from Care for AIDS to Untold, and a whole different brand persona, a whole different approach to how we think about storytelling and how we steward the stories of our clients and of our donors. And it's gotten us to a really beautiful place.
It has. And that wasn't the only motivating factor for the rebrand, but it was the timing of it was so perfect for our journey to recognize that we had outgrown the Care for AIDS brand for a number of reasons. And it was a perfect opportunity to go back and, undo a little bit of what we did through the Beyond Blood work and allow us to create a brand that was true to the heart of the work and to the clients, and not being centered around me. So
okay, I want to take like a kind of a hard pivot. And still talking about blind spots, but we have talked in the last episode and in this one about how fun it's been to work together, how great we are. I'm going to listen to these on bad days. But at the end of the day, the succession plan was not your decision, and it was the board's decision. And so I want to talk about the journey that you had alongside the board. Did the board have a blind spot in talking about succession? It's, as we talked about in the last episode, an unusual time, you're at an unusual age, unusual stage of the organization. So share what you can about the board's blind spots, how you navigated that, and what got us here today.
Yeah. I don't fault the board for where they were, because I can imagine that, as an organization, we were, we were 10, 12 years old. The board had a 33-year-old founder and CEO at the helm, and things were going pretty good.
The last thing we need to talk about right now is succession.
And I get it. It's hard when you have the leader in the chair, especially a leader that's doing really well, to even broach that subject can feel really threatening. And so I didn't necessarily think the board had been negligent in that, but I did want them to have these conversations. And I was beginning to recognize that for a lot of the reasons we talked about, we were not ready to make this kind of handoff. And I knew that if there did come a day when that needed to happen and the organization wasn't ready, and I didn't feel that I could step away from this leadership role without like a very high cost to the organization, I would come to resent the work. And I would come to resent the organization or resent the board, and I might just disengage and just stay involved because it felt like I needed to be. And so I needed the board to recognize that we needed to take steps. Whether or not we knew at the time it was going to end in your transition to CEO, we didn't know that for certain. I had a long play in mind. I was going to encourage the board in that direction. But at the end of the day, I told the board, I said, I want to work on this because when it comes down to it, I want to be able to say that I am here at Untold because this is where I feel God has called me to be in this season. I don't want to be here because the organization requires it. Yeah. And that's just I did not like that feeling. And so I went to the board and said, hey, this is how I could see us over the next 5 years walking through the succession journey. And I was not shy about saying that I thought that having an internal successor was going to be the key to a key to success. And I was not shy about saying that I thought it would be you. But to your point, the board, still had a hard time imagining you doing the role of CEO, and that may be because you didn't fit the archetype of
and I
a
don't
lot of
fault them for it at all.
Yeah, and they hadn't seen you had unproven in your fundraising track record, which is a big part of the job, and so. But we began to have that conversation, and I did not face a lot of resistance, but it did take some time to kind of bring them along on that and explain why I'm thinking about this, why I care about it. We had the unique opportunity, being that our work is both here and in Africa, to say, and we didn't know this at the time. Turns out the data really strongly suggests that if the founder can stay on in some constructive manner, it actually increases the chance that the transition will be successful. But at the time, I did see that as the best practice of what I'd seen in the industry. So I had the proposal to the board was say, let's prepare, let's make sure that you guys feel comfortable with Molly in this role. So where do you think she has opportunities for growth, and how can I coach her up in that? And then is there an opportunity for me to serve with Untold in Africa, actually creating a job that addresses the felt needs of our African operation, but also plays into my strengths and leverages my strengths. And so it has been this has now spanned 3 board chairs.
That's right.
And
That's
each of these board chairs has brought something unique to this conversation. And it has been this dance of them, properly asserting their authority as the governing body, and also then them kind of deferring to me in that process, and the back and forth. And of course, there's been frustrations where things I wish would go faster or have a different outcome. And I know they feel frustrated with me when I'm pushing on them, but it has been, we've normalized this over 5 years, normalized this conversation about succession in a way that I wish we had done prior to that. I would not have taken offense to that conversation even early in my leadership tenure. But I think that's every organization, whether your leader is in his or her first year or 10th year or 20th year, go ahead and have those conversations, create that plan. And ultimately, we've seen the board, even the board has turned over a lot in the last 5 years, but they've come along with this, and they're excited about the next season.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when pressed, everyone would say, like, yes, I know that succession as a topic is under the purview of the board. I imagine it's like, I don't fault the boards for what's 100 minus 17? The percentage?
83.
I have a blind spot.
The blind spot is
math.
Mental math is
everybody's blind spot. It's every millennial's blind spot. The organizations that do not have a succession plan, I don't blame their boards, because to your point, bringing it up can and often does feel threatening to the founder or the incumbent CEO. And so I think you have, displayed this really, to your metaphor, beautiful dance with the board, where you're bringing it up to demystify it, to signal like, I am healthy and willing and ready to talk about this. And then they have exercised their authority by saying, great. And remember, you can really recommend Molly, but at the end of the day, it's a board and governance decision. The CEO is the employee of the board as a collective. And so it's this interesting, like, both parties have to be really willing to talk about this in a way that is not threatening, that's not personal, that's forward thinking, where the mission is the mission, that's still really caring for the current leader. And I think leaders, it's scary because of the identity stuff we're talking about. Earlier this year, we joke about it, but like, it is so obviously on display when you and I both spoke on panels at a conference that were in the room right next to each other. And the topic of the panel that I was moderating was about organizational scale. And it was like, the room was full, standing around, like, people were like, it was absolutely as full as it could be. And you were literally right next door, and your panel was about succession. It's like 3 people.
It was more like 6 or 7.
Okay, 6 or 7 people. One of them was the son of another panel.
True. That's true. There was some family involved in that. But yes, it was a small turnout.
And like, we joke about it. But the reality is that is such an obvious and practical display of like what current leaders value. You're going to sign up for the panel about scale and growth. You're not going to sign up for the panel about succession, because scale and growth equals I'm succeeding, I'm needed, I'm doing my job, I'm getting all A's. Succession signals a lot that leaders are typically not encouraged to think about or talk about in a safe space. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think your experience with the board is a really helpful illustration for people thinking about this, because it takes, but like you can't blame the CEO for not having a succession plan, but you can't blame the board. Like they have to work in partnership. And I think one of the many things that I'm taking away from this process is that I'm already thinking about my successor. Like I haven't even gotten into the role yet. We're a couple months away from that. And I'm so tolerant of and excited about that conversation, even on day one, because I've been able to see the benefit of someone who's willing to open-handedly talk about it, de-escalate the emotions around it, be practical about it, and put the mission first. And so I hope that I can continue that legacy by there are seasons of my leadership, and like when I get to the season, I want to have the right person already ready. 2 of the right 3 that I want to develop so many people that are able to replace me, because you've done that, and I'm seeing the benefit of it. So what other blind spots do we need to get into?
I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of good ground. Maybe do you have any closing thoughts on blind spots as it relates to identity or succession? What would be the final takeaway that you would leave our listeners with in this episode?
I think all of this conversation, but all of the conversations that we're having around the succession in the context of this podcast, but also just the conversations that we've had with the board and our team members, are predicated on the idea that this is no longer the royal we, that your identity and my identity as human beings are placed rightly.
Yeah.
It's impossible to talk about blind spots and not feel like you have something to hide or something to lose or some level of shame. If your identity is what you produce, or if your identity is the grades that you get on on your stuff, or whether or not you're getting the promotion or the leadership, like blind spots are painful only when your identity is misplaced.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm perfect and that like I love hearing about blind spots. Like it's going to be painful baseline no matter what.
Yeah.
But the more leaders in particular in the type of work that we get to do are formed in their normal day-to-day life, in their homes, in their spiritual life, by an identity that is not linked to what they produce or, how people see them, the more tolerant you are of hearing about your blind spots and developing systems around them. And so I think everything we talk about on this podcast, none of it's going to work for anyone else and wouldn't have worked for us if you're not constantly doing the slow, frankly, boring work of soul care and formation and placing your identity. For me personally, it's like my primary identity is that I am made in the image of God, and I get to contribute to the world through a vocation that also supports my family. Like all of those things are benefits, but that's not what makes me who I am. And so if you're a leader listening to this and you're like, man, blind spots feels painful, or like, I don't really want to get an annual review from my team about where I'm too good. It's like so annoying to hear someone be like, there's things that you're bad at, but you know what's also bad is when you're too good. It's like, I get that this sounds, painful, but it's not if you're able to consistently anchor yourself in a right identity. And so if there's nothing else someone takes away from this podcast, it's that like, first things first, get your identity in a place where like it's not too linked to your work, and then all these things become much, much easier.
I love that. We're going to take a whole episode here in a few to talk more about that in particular and dive deep into practices that can more rightly form us into the things that God would desire for us to be. And on that note, we will wrap it up, and we'll be back in a little bit with episode 3.
Yeah.
Thank you.